Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator broadcasting across the state of Alaska. It's the Michael Dukes Show. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to the 6 o'clock club. That's for those of you who are brave enough to drag yourself out of bed before 7 a.m. and come on board and join us. It's the unofficial club here. You can all brag about it now. Yep, go ahead. 6 o'clock club you got here. We're ready to do it. Today is Thursday, and in fact, it is the final day of broadcast for this week. As I've been mentioning, I am going to be off the air tomorrow since I'll be traveling and moving and shaking and doing some stuff tomorrow, but I will be back on Monday. On Monday, we should have tentatively scheduled Nancy Dahlstrom in hour 1, and Nick Begich is confirmed for hour 2, so it should be a big, busy morning right before the primary election. But today, we've got another full boat of guests and candidates, discussions, and talk about what's happening here in the state of Alaska. In hour 2, we'll be joined by Incumbent Sarah Vance down in Homer. She'll be talking with us about her run for reelection in the state house, and we'll see what she has to say. But here in hour 1, we move all the way back up into the interior, my old hometown and stomping grounds, and we're going to be talking with Savannah Fletcher, who is a candidate for State Senate in District R, one of the biggest districts, I think, in the state. And she's going to come on board and talk with us here in just a hot second about her ideas, her vision, where she's going what she wants to do for the state of Alaska, and everything else. First things first, I will say, that I appreciate Savannah coming on and reaching out. I reached out to 126, I think, different candidates, and very few who would probably consider this show to be hostile territory had decided to reach back out and try and engage us. And so while Savannah and I will probably not agree on much, she at least had the kindness to come on and the, I guess, bravery, I don't know, to come on out and join us. Although we're not really hostile, we just may disagree. That's how it works around here. All right. So before we go any further, I guess we should just jump in and get started. We've got the hour to continue. She's sitting in the green room right now, so let's pull her into the conversation and start it out. Savannah Fletcher joins us right now from the Fairbanks area, looking like she's broadcasting from outside. Ooh, nice. It's a little rainy here. Not quite ready for the outside broadcasting right now. Savannah Fletcher.
Yeah.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. And when you have a 1-year-old sleeping inside, it's an extra incentive to be outside so you don't wake him up too early. But I'm doing well. How are you this morning, Michael?
Good. Yeah, I feel that. I remember those days of the 1-year-old trying to sleep. So that's for sure. Well, thanks for coming on board the program and joining us. Again, as I said, Savannah, you probably never really listened to the show or anything, but I will just say that while we will probably disagree, we will not, I'm not a hostile host. We'll just have a conversation here, and whether we agree or not, we'll leave at least on good terms. So that's what it should all be about here this morning, is being able to have a conversation. So let's get started and just find out. So for folks who don't know anything about you, let's get a little bit of your background, who you are, where you came from. And then we'll talk about the election itself. So give us some backstory, some origin story, as they say in the comic book movies.
Yes, happy to. And I also just want to say I really appreciate you inviting us. I appreciate the open invitation to all candidates. And I do think we're kindred spirits in protecting our constitutional freedoms and rights. I do that as my day job. So I feel some connection there. But my name's Savannah Fletcher. I am here just west of Fairbanks. I live off the Parks Highway, and I have a 1-year-old, as we discussed. He'll be 2 at Halloween time, which is exciting. My husband and I live here. I have some sled dogs. I'm realizing my dog food is in the background, but don't mind that. Otherwise, I work in town as a civil rights attorney. I have spent years representing tribes, representing children in their child protection cases. I also do constitutional rights cases, so working on a lot of free speech cases right now. And otherwise, I also defend survivors of domestic violence and work on some of those, unfortunately, really prevalent DV cases in our community. But otherwise, in the evenings, I think more people in the community know me as our presiding officer of the Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly. So we have another meeting tonight. Hopefully it won't go as late as most of ours have been lately. And otherwise, I'm in my 30s. I first moved up to Fairbanks when I finished law school. So like many, I got up here in my 20s as soon as I could, and I just fell in love. I met the community, and you'll know from having lived here, Michael, just especially this interior community is so welcoming and unique. And I got my sled dogs, I moved into a dry cabin, and then you just fall in love and you never leave. So that's a bit of my origin story, and I managed to meet the love of my life, and now we live here together with a family. So that's me, and I'm really excited to talk about the issues that are important to Interior, but also just statewide today.
I I served on the Borough Assembly in Fairbanks for about 5 years, so I know that can be it can be rewarding, but it could also be ultimately frustrating. But it is a hard thing. Those late night meetings sometimes were definitely difficult for sure. What made you decide to jump from? I mean, obviously you're already, as a presiding officer of the assembly, you're already busy. What made you decide to jump from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak, and jump into the statewide race? What was there one specific thing? Was there a combination of things? Was there a straw that broke the camel's back? What made you decide to do it?
Great question. I'd say it's a mix. One, I love the work. And as you know, to be effective, whether it's at the assembly level or the state level, you really have to enjoy putting in the hours and doing the research on these issues. And so when thinking about how do I want to spend my time, I think more public service really spoke to me. But specifically going from local to state, things like our required local contribution, it's the biggest burden we have in terms of taxes every single year for the borough assembly. And as we were discussing this, Mayor Ward and I would go down to Juneau and speak with representatives, and they really didn't even understand what we were talking about. And I found, a lot of unfunded mandates coming from the state that really had the largest impact on our property taxes out of anything in the borough. And having people who have that local government experience and want to use that to inform how we set state policies so we don't have these unintended consequences really motivated me. But also the ability to address things that the borough assembly doesn't. I've been door knocking a lot, and it's just been a major point of conversation for years now is our salmon fisheries and the Yukon River, especially, and losing that subsistence ability. We've tried to advocate for things from the borough level, but we don't have any of those powers. And so I'm hoping to at least elevate that conversation because I don't think we're seeing the progress that we need if we want to protect our salmon runs.
It's interesting. There's no website. You don't have a website, but I do have your candidate.
Oh, I do. Sorry, I
do you?
thought I sent that to you. Yeah.
I apologize. I was just looking at the state website. So I was looking at your official candidate statement on the state website. So
Yes.
let me address the elephant in the room, just to begin with, because you have, you're a civil rights attorney. You worked with places like the Northern Justice Project, and you're being supported in part by a lot of Democrats. But in your positioning statement, you said we need representatives who put politics aside, and you have noted yourself as being undeclared. What would you say to people who go, well, it's very obvious that you may be undeclared, but you're aligned and supported by basically Democrats? And a lot of people feel like this idea that we need to put politics aside is kind of a smoke and mirrors game, I guess I would say. We've seen several candidates, or we've seen several politicians over the last 10 years make a decision to change their affiliation to undeclared or independent as a way to, I don't know, to mollify those more in the middle, or to maybe smoke and mirrors it a little bit. What would you say to people who throw those things out?
Well, you and I both know folks will say what they want to say, but ever since I've moved to Alaska in 2017 and became a resident, I've always been undeclared. So there's no switching it up on people or changing the game. That's how I've always been. And really, you can ask Mayor Ward. We laugh about this when we check in for borough assembly meetings. I am often the most conservative vote at the dais on certain issues. We had Barbara Haney, one of my fellow assembly members, bring up a change to fees to give just a specific group a special exemption and otherwise have everyone else pay the fee. And I was like, I don't know necessarily if we want to target and give certain benefits to some and not all. And if this is the cost to our government, we should at least have a partial fee to cover the cost versus having the taxpayers bear it. I lost that vote. There are also times when you might see me as a more left-leaning individual at the dais trying to make sure that our budget is sustainable. I mean, I don't really know if that, again, lots of these things, road maintenance, making sure that we have a sustainable plan for our road service areas now that they can't rely on the state capital funding they used to receive routinely. I don't see these as partisan issues. And I've worked with folks a lot on the borough assembly across the spectrum. Like right now, we have people of many divergent views. And as you know, the majority of our votes are 9-0. So I come from a sincere place when I say I'm undeclared. I don't want to be beholden to either party. People are going to feel free to support financially or endorse who they wish, and that's their free speech right. But I'm seeking support from people of all political stripes. And Michael, if you'd like to donate to my campaign to add a few more libertarian donors, I would welcome it, truly. But yeah, and when I say we need to put politics aside, I think the Senate has recently walked that talk. A 17 out of 20 bipartisan majority. If I were to create a tripartisan majority caucus, that is something that is novel across the country. We don't see other state legislatures doing that. And so when I say I'm willing to participate in that, regardless of the letter next to your name, that's what I mean. I don't want to just be beholden. I think you say like what annoyed us or what got me to run for state legislature, something that made me actually hesitate to run was how much I see this partisanship. Folks who will hold a bill up in committee because of a separate, entirely unrelated issue that they're trying to leverage over someone, or because of the letter next to the person's name and they don't want to give them a win. that stuff really frustrates and disgusts me. I want to do things because they're the right thing to do and focus on the substance of it, not this partisan political game where you're trying to give one party a leg up over another. So that's what I talk about when I say I want to put that kind of petty partisan politics aside.
You know, it was interesting to me, and I don't want to skew too far into this because I want to get into I want to get into the main state issues. But you mentioned Barbara Haney, and I know that as a civil rights attorney, one of the big things that you've pushed for and you've talked about in some of the writings that I've read is that you're about, civil rights and being able to speak and everything else. And yet there was this whole thing about her being able to write an op-ed piece in the paper, and because she didn't include the phrase that she was speaking on her own behalf or whatever. I mean, I've written pieces. Like I said, I served in the Borough Assembly and I was on the air every day for the 5 years that I was on the Borough Assembly. I never once had to say, I'm speaking only for myself. It was pretty obvious that I was speaking for myself. And yet under your presidency, they have censured her, over writing an op-ed piece without putting those 6 or 7 words in. How does that jive? How does that jive for people who go, well, wait, I thought you were all about civil rights and protecting constitutionally protected things like speech and everything else. And I guess the ethics committee was not even 100% behind. So explain it to me real quick before we move on to the rest.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you raised this because I think, unfortunately, we've made a mountain out of a molehill that's really Miss Haney. Everyone at the dais is free to write whatever they wish in a letter to the editor, free to go on radio shows. Our current ethics code requires that when you do that, you include a disclaimer. So she's still free to write as much as she wants, but I'm actually working on an amendment to that. I just was meeting with the chair of the ethics board yesterday and brainstorming what would be a good fix. And I think it's important if you're the mayor or if you're in my role as presiding officer, you do have that authority to speak on behalf of the borough or the assembly. I think we should require a disclaimer for those entities. In fact, I'll say I'm saying this opinion in my personal capacity right now. But I think otherwise it is silly and it's putting form over substance, and you're right. And so I'm excited to make a change there. But me being presiding officer had nothing to do with that. A single citizen filed a complaint. The ethics board found a violation, and currently under code, we were required to hear it and then to issue some sort of penalty. So $1 and a voluntary training that I think most of us will be attending on ethics. It really wasn't a hugely punitive or challenging thing. It was just unfortunately following code that I now intend to update and make better.
Savannah Fletcher is our guest candidate for State Senate in District R. We're going to drop into the hot and heavy stuff of state business here in just a second, but we're up against the first break already. That's how fast it goes. It is the fastest 2 hours in radio. Back with more in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with more and Savannah Fletcher right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the commercial break right now. Just me and Savannah Fletcher, our guest, and I don't know, 60 or 70 of our closest friends on the internet here hanging out in the meanwhile. So Savannah, before we jump into the rest of the state stuff, I mean, I hear what you're saying on this thing with the ethics and pushing it forward, but I guess my understanding is at one point that there was a recommendation from the ethics committee to just, that there was nothing further done. And then it was pushed by somebody on the assembly. I don't know if it was you or somebody else to move forward on that. Am I misunderstanding the situation? Am I misconstruing it?
Yeah, that is a misunderstanding. So the ethics board said, just issue a censure that says we found a violation. And they said, leave it at that. We don't think you need to do anything more than that. They said, we think you should have a training for everybody. So that ended up mirroring largely what the assembly did, plus the nominal dollar. But the Board of Ethics, when they had their hearing, they didn't realize that a penalty under our current code is required no matter the severity or lack thereof of the ethics violation. And so it was actually our legal and our clerk that advised that we had to set this for a hearing and there had to be a penalty. So our process always required that hearing to be scheduled. I think, unfortunately, people who wanted to make this about a fight involving me when it didn't tended to say, well, because you followed your procedural duty and you approve agendas with the clerk, that I had this motive to put it on there. But it really was just required, like anything else that's required to go for a hearing.
So even though they recommended no punishment or something, that you were like, oh, well, that's great, except for you're saying that the code required something.
Yeah, I mean, that's what legal told us. You'll hear Miss Dolan if you listen to the actual assembly meeting where we took up the ethics issue. And she's told us you have to issue a penalty. Brett Roderman asked for clarification. David Guttenberg asked for clarification. And I don't think it sat well with people. So that's actually part of my code amendment I intend to make as well. I think there are certain ethics violations, especially fraud, fiscal mismanagement, that are severe enough and should mandate some kind of penalty. You don't want to let people just get away with misusing public resources and dollars. But things like this that really didn't feel fair, and it felt like I think Miss Haney, there was no intention behind it to violate that, and she really just wanted to speak her mind and felt kind of caught. I don't think we need to mandate penalties for that because people just feel icky about it. It's hard to be united as a body when you feel like you have to attack people on small things.
Before we're about 2 minutes out from returning to the radio right now, and I don't like to repeat myself, so I kind of usually veer off the subjects a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to come back to the independent and undeclared thing. Do you classify yourself? I mean, do you have philosophically, I'm a libertarian, but I'm probably what people would call a more conservative libertarian, right? I have certain beliefs. I just don't necessarily believe in parties and so smaller, more limited government. I'm pro-life. I mean, there's some things like that, which other libertarians would then want to choke me for, so it's kind of one of those things. Where do you think you fall on the spectrum of left versus right? Where would you tell people that you kind of fall on that spectrum, even though you're undeclared and independent, not associated with a party? On the philosophical scale, where do you fall?
It's a good question. I think as I serve longer and live longer, it's ever evolving. I think in general, I just dislike the fact that we treat it as a binary, a left to right spectrum, because I see it much more as a web, if you will. And there are certain issues where I want local government control. Right now at the Borough Assembly, we're talking about elections. And I think we need to have the ability to decide that. We've talked about Tammy Wilson, Frank Tomaszewski's proposals to move elections to November in the past, and the logistical challenges and things our community doesn't want to have. And I think having that choice to choose, Anchorage does April, some do it on the same day as federal.
Right.
I think that kind of thing, I like local control. So it depends. The
lawyer answer is it depends. Okay. All right. I got it. All right. Well, the ding means that we're about to return to the radio, so we're going to kick back into it. Please like and share, folks. Like and follow. If you haven't been over to Rumble yet, I just started simulcasting on Rumble. Make sure you follow over there as well. Let's get back into it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do it.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
No, I'm a perfect angel. Perfect angel. No pain anywhere. Let's continue on. Our guest this morning is Savannah Fletcher, who is a candidate for State Senate in District R. And, of course, that is the district formerly held by Senator Click Bishop. And we've got quite a few names out there in that race. But I want to get down into the nitty-gritty now and talk about state business. Savannah, this last session, the number one issue that seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room, normally it's the PFD, but this time around it started out as education. And, of course, we heard it from most of the major media outlets in the state of Alaska that, well, education, we flat funded it. We just haven't been doing what we need to do. Now, true, the BSA has had only a slight, minuscule 1 or 2 point increase since 2017.
But every year we fund on top of it otherwise. I've watched your show, Michael. I
Yeah,
know where you're going. 10
millions and
million some
millions.
years, 170. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
exactly. Millions of dollars. And so, I mean, first of all, I'm a little offended by that they just carry the water on that instead of having some real analytical thought that while the base student allocation has been relatively flat over the last 5 years, in the last almost 20 years, it's been a 35% increase, and we're spending, a couple $2 billion on 135,000 students. So the question is, if you'd been involved in this debate, what would your position have been? Does the BSA need an increase? Do we need to find other ways of funding? Is there efficiencies that we can find? Give me your take. If you had been standing on the floor this last session, what would your argument have been?
Thank you for asking. I would join the chorus of voices, and really a major majority prior to Governor Dunleavy's veto that supported an increase within the BSA. I do think it's important, and I know you've discussed this with others on the show, and this is not the first time anyone's hearing this, but having that embedded within a formula that people follow every single year and is part of law versus just what do we feel like adding as an option this year in the budget does give people that ability to responsibly plan. And we've seen what happens when we don't have it coming from that reliable source. Up here in the Fairbanks North Star Borough, we've just closed Ben Eielson, and we're anticipating closure of at least a couple more schools over the next 2 years. And so that's fine. It's probably appropriate as our student demographics populations shift and change, but it does just make it hard. We have currently 15 unfilled positions that we need this year for our school district, schools just starting today. And I think teachers and workers in general don't want to go apply for a job at what might appear to be a sinking ship. It's tough. And when you don't have the benefits, of also a discussion in this year's session that make it an appealing place to work, it's really challenging. And I think everyone who runs on the school board, all they talk about these days has been, what are we going to cut? Not how do we make this the best learning environment for students? How do we ensure that, that 4th and 5th grade band and orchestra, for example, that used to be a pride and joy in Interior, we're really proud of our musical abilities, it's gone. And I played clarinet from 5th grade on, and I feel like it really benefited my development. But now, because we don't have, if we had it in the BSA permanently, it wouldn't take all the air out of the room every single year. It'd be the formula, it would be predictable. The school district, which has to issue its budget prior to the assembly's budget, prior to the state's budget, wouldn't have to be guessing. And I think that's really where I come from. How can we expect people to make a fiscally sound budget when we're leaving them with these major questions until nearly the start of the next fiscal year? It's a big challenge logistically, and my heart goes out to anyone trying to budget in that circumstance.
Well, I mean, that's working as intended. I mean, again, not to be too cynical, but these things have all kind of aligned. Contract requirements have mandated pink slips to go out at a certain time, and it all kind of aligns with budgets and everything else so that there is public pressure on this process because, like I said, it's working as intended, because then they can say, well, we've issued pink slips, and do you really want these teachers to be fired? And so that increases the public pressure to make sure that education gets the maximum amount of money. That's just how it's worked for years, unfortunately. And I guess the question is the BSA the right Harold says lever? And that's the thing. Is it the right lever to fix what's going on? And where is the accountability in that? I know I spoke with Mike Schauer here. I speak with him frequently on the program, but a few weeks ago, or actually during the session, he said, look, I offered an amendment to increase the BSA, but there had to be an accountability measure because, again, we're spending more than most school districts in the country as a state, most state governments in the country. And yet we still are down in the bottom as far as achievements. And so we want to make sure we all want education. I don't think there's any discussion on that. It's how we get it is the fight. But if we spend it and we're still getting the lowest, results, something's got to change. Something's fundamentally flawed in there. And it's not just money, because the money has just done nothing but increase across the gain. So what is the problem in there? And is the BSA the best way to do it?
A good question. And actually, one of my opponents, Mike Cronk, and I agree on this. He, as a former teacher, confirmed. We had a constituent meeting back in June where he said, I don't think teachers are intentionally failing our students. I don't think educators are. So why do we think holding this threat of no funding over them will make them work harder, do better? So that's where the disconnect for that logic lies for me. The things we have seen meaningful improvement on in our schools are through things like the READS Act. And granted, that only came with a $30 BSA increase, so I don't think that reflects the added costs of such a measure, but substantive, meaningful input, not threatening to cut someone at the knees financially. That's where we've seen people grow and seen improved results, even just after a couple years of the READS Act. We've seen meaningful increases in literacy. And I was speaking with a retired now, she comes back and does this tutoring program, teacher in Delta Junction, and she's a one-on-one intensive math support. And she's seen students really grow in that elementary age in their math abilities because you have the ability to take someone who's struggling from behind and catch them up to everyone else while the rest of the class can go forward at a pace that works for them. And those kinds of interventions are what I've seen make a difference for students. I think threatening no funding unless we see results is making assumptions that people aren't trying, and it just adds to that chaos, and it's going to add to people coming and spending time in Juneau saying we're getting these pink slips. And I don't think making a political drama out of this is the solution.
Well, I don't think it's a threat of no money unless you kowtow. I think it's give us a plan as to how you're going to analyze this. And you talk about the READS Act and only getting $30 in the BSA for the READS Act. Well, isn't it behooving to the school boards and the other administrations to say, well, if this is really working, then we need to shuffle some money around. Maybe we need to be more efficient. Maybe we need to move things from programs that aren't working. Shouldn't it force an analysis of what's being done? This is not I'm holding the money hostage if you don't do what I say. This is, we want a plan. Give us some accountability and a plan to say how you're going to do this. And yes, you may have to reorganize your money. You may have to rebudget. I mean, people who work in private industry do this all the time. They have to they have to analyze what's going on and say, whoa, this money we're spending over here is not delivering the results we want, but this new thing that we're doing here is, and it's underfunded. So let's draw money from one side of the equation to the other. I mean, aren't these the hard questions that should be asked by school boards and administrations when they're looking at this and finding things that are working and bolstering them by drawing from other programs? I mean, there's not an infinite amount of money.
I agree. We don't have infinite amounts of money. I work in private industry as well, and our firm regularly has to check our budget and means to make ends meet. So what I'm saying, though, is that we're talking about, I think, two separate things. One, let's see that accountability piece. Let's see meaningful changes in how we educate students to get those improvements. I agree with you there. I think the other piece that people talk about, and this is where they throw out the phrase you don't enjoy, the flat funding and the BSA, they want to see the dollars that are accounting for those inflationary growths in cost moved from the one-time funding each year in the budget and see that piece go in the BSA. And so I think both can be true. It's, yes, we need to see that accounting for just increased costs that everyone's experiencing put into the BSA or put into some predictable vehicle so it's out of the hands of the political football every single year of how much will it be? We don't know till the very last day of session or even later in case the governor vetoes it. That's one piece. But then how do we deal with the BSA and the reliable funding we give moving forward? And does the state need to have new accountability measures in the vein of the READS Act for all types of things, for math, for literacy, for science, for writing? Perhaps we need to change how we do that. And, I think of even our homeschool programs, our correspondence programs, we've made it optional for folks to do testing where they can show meaningful improvement and reaching certain academic goals at each year. And maybe we need to mandate that again across the board for everyone, because that accountability piece is huge, especially when you're just handing out money to folks to add to a homeschool curriculum. You want to make sure that's going to a good, worthwhile place and students are getting the improvements they need in their education.
I want to touch on homeschooling here in just a second, but to say this also, I mean, it sounds like, and this has always been my problem with a base student allocation type funding formula, is that you're tying the hands of a legislative body that's sole function is to appropriate, and the whole binding of one body over to another has always been a problem. Now, technically, it's not bound. Any legislature can open up a formula. Yada, we all know that. But by tradition, right? And tradition sometimes has as much force as law. Oh, we can't touch the formula because it's set in stone. And so by tying the hands of future legislators and not knowing where costs are going to come from or where even revenues are going to come from, to me, this is kind of a dangerous thing. It should be, legislating should be a messy process. I mean, that's how the founders intended it. I mean, it's not supposed to be an easy button. You know, we one side get what they want, the other one winners, one losers. It should be kind of a battle. That's what it's about, and that's why you can't bind one legislative body over another. Even the assembly can't bind another assembly over in the future, because things change, and they understood that, and they knew that we should need to fight it because there could be things that are different. For example, demographics, student declines, population booms or declines. I mean, none of these things should be doing. So this idea that we should just lock it in and there should be certainty. I mean, from a budgeting standpoint, that's great. But from a uncertainty and revenue standpoint and priorities and other spendings in state government, that can be problematic because it ties the hands of the legislature, whether really, truly it's bound in law or just in tradition, it binds the hands of the legislature. Do you agree?
Well, you said to yourself it doesn't actually bind their hands, but people tend to follow the formula. But I'm curious by this take, Michael. Does it mean that you personally are against having a formula statutory PFD because it would also bind legislators in the same way?
I'm not against having a statutory PFD, and I'm not against having the BSA, but again, to treat it as if it's sacrosanct in that regard. I've said it off and on. If you want to change the formula for the PFD, change the formula if that's the problem. Don't ignore the law, which is what they've done right now. They basically just disregard the law. And in fact, they've got the two competing laws of the statutory and the SB 26 POMV law at the same time. Eliminate one or change it. I have no problem with that. What I'm saying is to treat it as if it's sacrosanct is the main problem here. I do want to quickly here, I've only got about a minute, so we'll touch on it and then we can revisit it on the other side. But this idea of homeschooling, correspondence schooling, ESAs in Arizona have taken off. That's education savings accounts. There's been a lot of talk. Some states are now talking about things like backpack funding, where the money follows the student, where parents and students can make choices to go to whatever institution that seems to fit their style, because each child, I had 5 children, each one had a different learning style. So what is your take on I guess I'll ask a short question. Do you support an ESA or a backpack funding type situation for people to be able to have choices wherever they are in the state?
I support correspondence programs and having that choice for sure. And I think that means, currently, if you switch to Raven Homeschool in Fairbanks, that money is going to YKSD and not to the FNSB school district. And that makes sense, whoever's offering the program. So keep it short.
Okay, you keep it short. And that's fine. We can expand on this a bit because I do want to talk a little bit, like I said, about the backpack funding and something else. We'll also talk about defined benefits and a fiscal plan when we return. One final segment for hour one. Like I said, the fastest 2 hours in radio. We continue here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with more here in just a moment with Savannah Fletcher.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Savannah Fletcher is our guest here on the program. We're in the commercial break right now. Got about 5.5 minutes here before we return. Savannah, that's the thing with it. I think irritates a lot of people who are supportive of, the PFD and the formula and everything else. Again, I'm not against the BSA per se, but to treat it like it's sacrosanct and can't be changed. Just like I've said it, if you're going to ignore the law, you feel free to modify the formula or do whatever, but just don't ignore it. Don't pretend like the statute doesn't exist, because then you have the danger of, you start ignoring other statutes. And while the legislature can't be bound, and that's what the court case said, I don't think the court intended you to just ignore the laws. They said you have the power to change it right? And as a lawyer, I would hope that that would be a clear delineation to you that,
I really care about rule of law. I'm with you. I think of the unfunded mandatory tax exemptions on boroughs, and they haven't paid that in decades. And it's like, all right, yes, you have the court is held. You don't have to fund this. If you don't end up funding it in the budget each year, you're okay, because like you said, the body has the freedom. But let's be honest in our statutes and guidance that we're making, I think, for all of these things. But in general, with that expectation, and I think, educators, school districts understand that the BSA isn't any more mandatory than this multiple guidances on the PFD or on those mandatory tax exemptions. But I think we should try to be consistent with whatever our planning is. And if the BSA is intended to calculate the actual basic need for education, then it should calculate that. And if we're putting money on top of it each year separately, then that shows there is something flawed with that formula, just like we have flaws with the
well,
PFD formulas.
shouldn't they have to fight just like every I mean, shouldn't they have to just in my belief is that government, each department, each program, each plan should have to justify its reason for existence, and two, why it deserves the funding more than some other project. Now, obviously, education is a constitutional mandate. Education,
Mhm.
public safety, infrastructure, those are the three big things that the Constitution provides for. And yet, we're spending 2% on infrastructure. We're spending 2% on public safety. And even though we're spending between the K through 12 and the university systems, we're spending about 22% on those things. So, so that makes it important, but I guess shouldn't it have to fight along with everything else out there for state dollars? I mean, it should be a struggle. That's what I'm saying. It was not meant to be an easy process. It was meant to be a struggle so that people had to justify so that we could keep the cost as low as possible. I think that was the intent. That's my reading of it. And so shouldn't it have to fight each year? And I know it does make it tougher sometimes when you don't have a set amount and you have to plan on the if come, but why should it be set out sacrosanct versus any other proposition, business or entity or whatever that has to make the same decisions? They can guess at what their revenues may be, but it's just that. It's a guess, right? We're planning and budgeting on a guess that we hope that this is what's going to happen. So why should it be set in stone for one thing and not have to fight on an equal footing for all the dollars that are in the state budget?
Well, first of all, I just want to clarify what we do in our private businesses. It's apples and oranges to say it's anything like how a school district and school board have to manage their budget. I can work extra hours. I can take on new cases. I can do additional work in my business when I need to make ends meet. A school board can't just go start working elsewhere to bring in some extra revenue. They are reliant on the assembly, the state, the federal money that comes their way. So I do just want to make that clear. We're handling different things, and I think we could agree on that. But in terms of why should they not have to fight, but you have to fight for other state funding, it comes down to who I think in that case, our capital budgets at a state level in terms of maintenance for our buildings, that is the legislative body taking care of its own capital needs. And if we at the borough were reliant on the state for giving us how much we're allowed to put into our KIP-MR each year, our capital improvements project maintenance reserve, then it would be chaos. How can we as a borough plan 10 years down the road for roof repairs, for certain major maintenance upgrades, heating repairs at North Pole High School this year, if we don't have the ability to set a predictable standard? Like, yes, we don't have to follow our 10% into our capital maintenance each year standard, but we agree as a body, let's set a goal and try to meet that every year so we can reliably plan long term. I think for certain operations, if you don't plan that way, you can't do something successfully. Private business has that ability. If we deny our school boards that ability through saying, here's our intended target and goal with the BSA, plan based on that, we're really setting folks up to fail. I think we're simultaneously telling them, invest in the appropriate number of educators and support staff that you need in classrooms to help kids meet these reading, math goals. But we need to then give them some stability so they can plan long term.
All right. Well, the ding means we're going to return. Savannah Fletcher's our guest. We've got a few more questions here before we run out of daylight for this hour. And, well, you won't run out of daylight in Fairbanks, I guess. It's just what it is. We'll continue here. The Michael Duke Show continues. Don't forget to like and share. You could share it from any platform you're watching it on right now. And, of course, As always, you can listen to the podcast later on places like Spotify. Let's continue and do this thing right now.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, continuing on now. Savannah Fletcher, our guest candidate for Senate District R. Before we went to break, we were talking about school choice. And she said she supports the correspondence programs. I homeschooled all of my kids through IDEA, so that's a program I'm ultimately familiar with. But also there's this new idea of, it's been titled, backpack funding. They also have the things, like I said, in Arizona, they've been doing really well with ESAs, education savings accounts, essentially giving them the opportunity to have the money that is delegated to each child on a per student basis follow the student to whatever educational choice that they want to make. Is that something you would support, or only through a school structured, where it's correspondence or distance learning or something like that? Would you support some kind of backpack funding or ESA setup in the state of Alaska?
If there's a constitutional way to support students having choice and families having the financial support they need to take up that choice, then I support that. I think that's what's been the issue in Alaska, is whether or not we're maintaining the separation of church and state when doing that, and using public dollars for something that doesn't support an unconstitutional funding. But yeah, especially in our district, so many students, whether they're in Fairbanks proper or in the more rural parts of District R, rely on homeschool and correspondence programs and having that choice. Many foster youth I've represented have had a lot of trauma or hardship related to the public schools they attend, and having the ability to do Cyberlinks or Raven has been a game changer for them, and they've been able to have it structured around their needs so that they can thrive. And I want that for students. I think having that choice has shown better improvements. Myself, when I was a student, was not struggling, but I wanted more opportunities and more challenges than my school could provide. And so I switched high schools and had that ability to go somewhere that gave me the more challenging curriculum. So yeah, I think that's really critical.
You mentioned earlier, just kind of in passing, retirements, benefits, things to attract more people. And of course, one of the things that was discussed was defined benefits. Now, currently, we still owe in unfunded liabilities to the first three tiers of the permanent, to the PERS and TERS program. We still owe about $7 billion in unfunded liability, down from 13. So we've been whittling away at it. But there was a big push this year in the Senate, and it died in the House, I think, to my relief. A brand new defined benefits program, ostensibly for first responders, and then it was expanded. Well, we could include teachers, but we all know that labor unions would then clamor to have some equitability, and so then we essentially would probably be covering every state employee with a defined benefits program. No real long-term fiscal note. Reason Foundation did a presentation for the legislature where they talked about it costing about $10 billion over 14 years. It's money. And so my question is that something you support? And if you do, the question then becomes, who pays for it? And is it the best solution? Or should we be looking at maybe changing how the defined contributions portion of it works?
I do support defined benefits, but I don't support it in the way we had it years ago, because the borough, for example, we still pay that, unfunded liability. We paid 22%, and it's really tough. A lot of that contribution is not going towards the benefit of current employees and staff, but for unfunded liabilities and past debts that we still owe on. So I don't think we can go back to the same system that we had before. It didn't work out, and we didn't have the actuarial accountability that we now have in place, having the kind of double accountability of one private actuarial review followed by another one who reviews that work to try and have more accuracy. But also, any defined benefit plan we move forward with now will have to have the employee chipping in and covering some of that potential liability. That is a change that's on the table that I think makes this a fiscally different proposition. And we've seen fiscal notes. Yes, the ones that we've seen from the governor's office in the short term maybe don't reflect what that group showed and presented to the legislature for long term, but at least what we see in the short term is $77 million of savings. And that is a fiscal note. That is, research we have on the table. But I think whatever we talk about next year will have some different specifics. But at the end of the day, that core principle that I do think is a meaningful change is that some of that liability and risk would be taken on by the worker themselves and not just by the state that would then have this big unfunded liability that got us into the debt we're still digging ourselves out of today.
You talked about fiscal certainty with things like the school district and the BSA and things like that. And the problem with defined benefits is you're defining a benefit which you have no idea what the actual cost is going to be sometime off into the future. And in fact, defined benefits, GM had to be bailed out from theirs. Delta did. The military stopped doing a defined benefit program. Many municipalities and states have stopped doing defined benefits because, again, it's an unknown down the road. You're encumbering yourself in a way that you have no idea versus a defined contribution where, you know how much it's going to cost and you know where it's going to go. And then they get to act just like pretty much anybody else who has a retirement or anything else. And it's portable, doesn't lock them in, doesn't require them to stay to vest or do anything else. So, how can you support that when you're seeing them drop, place after place after place for the very specific reason that we have no idea what it's going to really cost in 10 or 20. We have actuarials and they can guess, but as we've seen, mistakes have been made and we have no idea if healthcare costs or whatever are going to stay static or even on a standard rise over a period of time. Wouldn't it be better to look at something like increasing the defined contribution portion of it? I know there was some discussion in the legislature this last year on that would be the way to do it. What about the dangers of defined benefit?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're working from the same premise, because what I've actually been told and seen is that we're the only state. 49 other states do provide defined benefits for teachers, for educators, for example. And so I don't see people moving away from that. In fact, I see them doubling down on that as a method to try and retain good educators in the classroom. So I haven't seen the numbers showing a massive wave of turning away from defined benefit. But like anything, whether it's private business, I have investment accounts and I'm hoping to get, savings and earnings from that. And there's risk involved in everything. We don't know, no one necessarily saw a COVID pandemic coming and the economic impact that had. So then we saw challenges. I think nothing's certain ever moving into the long-term future, but that doesn't mean you don't try to implement policies and plans that will do right by our state, will do right by all the residents here, will do right by our workers and our employees. And we've heard loud and clear that defined contribution isn't working. And I think adding more to that is not going to suddenly help our retention problems, help our recruitment problems, help us really fill all these public positions. We're having a failed state where we can't even get our payroll out on time because we can't retain folks to work those jobs. So something has to change. I don't think trying the same thing over and over and just saying we'll give a bit more to defined contribution is going to get it done.
I wanted to talk about a fiscal plan. Let me just ask a quick question. Fiscal Policy Working Group, are you familiar with their presentation and their recommendations?
Only loosely. I've heard it discussed on your show a couple of times, and it's something that I want to look into more because that theory of working with things in a wholesome manner and not just one strategy, but you need multiple in consort is really important. But I'm not extremely well versed in it since it's not the body I've worked on.
Yeah, so we're down to the last 90 seconds. So I want to give you the final say here and get it done. And how do folks find out about you? So give us your elevator pitch and how do folks find out more?
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. I just want to say it's been a true pleasure. I enjoy speaking with everyone, so I really do appreciate the time, and it does fly fast. My name's Savannah Fletcher. I am running to serve as one of our next senators, and I truly mean it when I say I want to work with everyone, whatever letters next to your name, to bring solutions and not just to point fingers. I live in Fairbanks. I am a civil rights attorney, and I can bring proven solutions from my work at the borough assembly level and from representing many of the tribes within our district, and be that good advocate for everyone statewide. So I really would love your support. I want to support strong schools, affordable energy, and returning our salmon fisheries to a healthier state. And you can find out more about me at savannahforalaska.com. So Michael, I'll re-email that to you too if you'd like to check it out. and I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I really like to be engaged. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right, Savannah Fletcher, candidate for Senate District R. We'll continue our discussion. Sarah Vance coming up next. Hold the line, Savannah. Sarah Vance coming up next. We're going to be back with more of the Michael Duke Show. If you've got to go, be kind, love one another, live well. We'll be back after this. All right, Savannah. Well, if you've watched the show, you know this is where I like to give you the final bite at the apple. Last couple of minutes, if we missed anything or something you wanted to expand on, I will say that I did want to ask you one question I didn't get a chance to. In fact, somebody texted me and said, "Why aren't you asking?" I wanted to, but that hour goes so fast.
It does.
One of the big things of the program here is we're huge advocates of the Second Amendment, and I know there's been a lot of talk in the legislature about red flag laws and universal background checks, state storage. Everything wants to go back to the states. And I'm an advocate for state rights and for the states being able to decide what they want to do. But at the same time, I get a little concerned about those kind of positions. So what is your positions on, what's your quick position before I give you the floor because we have 6 minutes here. So I'll give you 2 minutes of it. But what's your position on, things like, creating some kind of new red flag law or any kind of restrictions on gun rights here in the state of Alaska? Do you have a position on that? Because there have been some bills floated the last couple of years that deal with things like that. There's been talk of safe storage laws and things like that. What's your position on those?
I don't currently have a position on those past bills that were floated around. It's definitely not a priority piece of legislation for me. I think our public safety needs, I'm focusing more on getting village public safety officers out there, making sure we have rehabilitative programs. I work a lot with foster families and also just families facing the child protection system. And I see the need for rehabilitative programs to deal with our substance abuse and mental health kind of problems in the community as a bigger priority for me.
Well, I mean, obviously, yes. I mean, mental health is, most of the bad issues that we seem to have in this country, well, the high visibility ones, I wouldn't say all of them, but high visibility ones definitely have a component of mental health in there. We need to be dealing with that for sure. I'm just concerned that the 99.9% of American gun owners who are lawful, legal, and law-abiding are not caught up in an attempt to try and fix the 0.0006% of people who who do violence with guns in one way or the other. And that is my concern, because that's essentially where the metric runs is you got less than 1% of people who possess firearms utilizing them in a bad way, and they're punishing the remaining 99.9%. And that, to me, is problematic. And we have to, at the state level, it's the only way we can't really affect the national level, but at the state level, we can fix that and we can protect the rights of people while still being compassionate and just with people who are doing the wrong things.
I couldn't agree more. We own firearms in our household, and like I said, I don't have specific stances on these things because it really hasn't been a focus of mine. I'm not going to come in. Those aren't my priority pieces of legislation. Honestly, we didn't get to talk about it, but a lot of my work with the Office of Children's Services, I want to be that advocate for families and keeping them together, and that is a focus of mine. If there's something where I do have certain specific things I really want to push, that would be it. And actually, oh, hi, speaking up, my 1-year-old just came out on the porch, but I'll say hi to him in a minute.
Hanging out.
Yeah, no, just hanging out.
I'll give you the last 2 minutes here then. If there's anything we didn't touch or anything, you want to expand on, here's your chance to do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, two things that I think we should be talking about more. The first is that required local contribution. And every single year, the state has that constitutional duty to fund education, but just for incorporated municipalities, they say, based on a calculation tied to not only your real property, but your personal property, we're then going to mandate that part of that funding that we've promised to your district, we're going to make you pay with taxes. And that is our biggest chunk of property taxes that people face every single year at the borough level. And I really, again, talking about if the state's not going to fund its, mandatory tax exemptions, if it's not going to fund other statutory promises it's made, why are we now penalizing municipalities for a thriving economy and making them pay more and more, even if it's totally unrelated to our school population, to our school district budget? I really think the required local contribution formula and mandate on these incorporated areas needs to be reevaluated. and it's really harming us. Oh no, I don't know if you hear him, but he's crying. It's okay, Elio, come on out. Sorry. I knew we were going to turn into a pumpkin soon, but that piece, and also just child protection and the right of foster youth. Right now, the state government steals foster youth benefits, their Social Security and their disability payments, to pay for their own foster care. And that is theft, in my opinion, from the most vulnerable people in our community. And I really want to change that in the legislature. I don't think a 14-year-old who is now a legal orphan should have to be funding their own foster care payments.
All right. Well, Savannah, thank you so much for coming on board. SavannahForAlaska.com. Thank you for answering questions and going through there. And we appreciate you being part of it today.
Thank you so much, Michael. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much for coming on board. All right. She's turned into a pumpkin. She said she's got to go take care of the kiddo. So that's how it works. All right. Does she carry open or concealed asking for a friend? The answer to that, I can guarantee, is no. She's a lawyer. She's a smooth talker, hopefully we've asked some good questions there and can get some, maybe we can get some thoughts in there, but that was interesting. That was interesting to say the least. But again, you got to give her kudos for at least coming on and facing the harder questions. But it's interesting. I forgot to ask about resolution 2024-27, which I don't know what that resolution is. And it wasn't really related to state business. So I didn't, I was trying to stay focused on state issues, Kelly. So, maybe if we have her back on, if she's just a borough assemblywoman, we have her back on, we can do that as well. I'm just so glad, I Snared Wolves on Rumble says, I'm just glad she did not have charts. Okay. Oh, mail-in voting is what that is? Yeah. Again, well, you saw how fast it went. I didn't even get a chance to really get into fiscal policy. I mean, seriously, this could be like a Joe Rogan 3-hour experience if we wanted to get it down to that. All right, Sarah Vance is in the green room, but we're 15 seconds out from restarting. So let's just fingers crossed that Sarah's audio works. All right, we're back. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Let's do it.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and also simulcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. I don't know. It's a thing. It's one of those things. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show, the Thursday edition of the show. Final broadcast day of the week this week. I know that I've been mentioning it, but I will be off tomorrow for my birthday. And we're going to be hanging out and doing some traveling. And I got stuff to do. I'm a busy boy this summer. So we're going to get that all squared away, and we'll be back on Monday. Why? Because I've got Nick Begich and I think Nancy Dahlstrom. Let me check my email just to be sure. Nancy Dahlstrom. Nancy Dahlstrom is going to be on a flight, so she's not going to be here on Monday. So it'll be Nick Begich, I guess. So there you go. We'll figure something out. Anyway, Monday we will be here. Oh, I should have taken Monday off. But it's going to do it. And then, of course, the primary on Tuesday. Don't forget that. If you haven't voted already, because early voting is now available at most of the everywhere. You just got to go to usually the Division of Elections office. And so that's all going on. Just finished up with Savannah Fletcher. That was an interesting interview. She's a lawyer. The answer very smooth, very smooth. It was an interesting conversation. You can go back and listen to it on the podcast if you want, available on Spotify or wherever you find podcasts. Meanwhile, let's dive into this in hour 2. We are going to be talking with Sarah Vance. That's right. All the way down in my adopted hometown of Homer, Sarah Vance joins us this morning to discuss. Let's get to it. Here we go. Good morning, Miss Vance. How are you, Mrs. Vance? How are you this morning?
Doing great.
Doing good. Did you have fun? Were you watching in the wings, or you just?
I was, and I'm laughing at the Olympic breakdancing comment. That one.
Yeah, it was much better than Olympic breakdancing. I'd watch it again and again. It was entertaining and educational. I think it's good to get different points of view, and I'm glad that we can get it all done. Sarah, been a while since we talked, and I know you got the primary coming up, and you guys got a hot and heavy race down there in Homer for State House. You're running for re-election, so I guess we just kind of kick things off and get started. For those of you who don't know, for folks who don't know you, or who haven't been paying attention, who are not fans of the show, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you've decided to continue to try and run for re-election in this. Why did you do it to yourself again? Why this madness?
People have asked me that a lot more this year than previous years, but I want to say good morning to all of our listening friends. I see all your comments, and it's great to be back on the show. Love connecting with everyone. I live in Homer. I represent the Lower Kenai Peninsula that goes from Kasilof all the way across Kachemak Bay, representing Halibut Cove and Soldovia. I have several passions. One is defending the vulnerable. The other is our fisheries. Those are the two issues that can make me cry and take up most of my energy. However, there are so many issues like defending our Constitution, our Second Amendment rights, parents' choice in education, so many others. I will say I am a little nervous, Michael, because I did get the 7 o'clock time slot. You were very kind to me. But on the flip side, you get so wound up that you're ready to go. You're already primed for our conversation.
Sure.
So,
well, you see, because you don't get up and watch the 6 o'clock part of the show, you don't realize that I've already been up for almost 2 hours by the time the show starts. So I'm already wound up. It doesn't matter.
If I get up early, then I have the easy Michael who's trying to slap himself awake, and it's a much smoother conversation.
Yeah.
But now you're already wound up and ready to go. And I guess the good news is that I do believe in backpack funding.
Okay.
And I believe that the money should follow the child. So I guess that puts
that
me
was an easy one, right? That was an easy one. And then
right there.
The red flag law one that was asked after the break, once we were in the top of the hour break. Folks on the radio don't know, but I asked her about gun laws and stuff, and she said it really wasn't an issue for her that she'd followed, and she really has no opinion on it. I kind of know where you stand on that already.
Very much so. It is interesting. I don't know that I've ever met anyone who doesn't have an opinion about the Second Amendment. It's one of our favorite, right, Michael? Firearm Friday that I seem to always miss.
The Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. It's the one right that allows all the other rights to exist, period. That's the thing.
Yes. So I'm almost hesitant to bring it up, but for me, it has value, and I am the only District 6 candidate who is endorsed by the NRA, and it's because I am a practicing member and have a proven record to vote for and pass bills that defend our Second Amendment rights. It's not just that I had a convenient vote. We actually passed the bill in the legislature. Thank you to our illustrious speaker, Representative Kathy Tilton, for protecting ammunition sales in gun stores during a state of emergency.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's important stuff, and I'm glad we know where some people stand, and we definitely know where you stand. Although I don't know if I'd bring up the NRA endorsement right now.
It's a little
It's a cringy
touchy subject right now.
Oh, it's cringy, man. You're like, oh, I'm endorsed by the NRA. Yes, just you and Mary Peltola. I mean, you guys are hip to hip, right on that.
No, don't say that. That's not nice.
I know it's so painful to watch. All right, Sarah. Well, let's talk a little bit here about, there's some big issues. Obviously, this last year, education was huge. Defined benefits tried to slip in the door, didn't make it. We talk about energy relief. We talk about a fiscal plan. These are all the big questions that are facing us. And I think of all of those things, and while they're all important, the one thing I actually want to kind of reverse order start with today is the fiscal plan, because really, that's the source of all of our problems. The source of all of our problems is the fact that we have no fiscal discipline, one. We have no fiscal, long-term outlook, and we just have no fiscal plan in this state. It's like we're making it up as we go along, and we're just taking as much money as we can from everywhere. We're dragging it out of every pot we can find, and we'll spend every dollar that's available, maybe leave a few in there for the supplemental budget that comes the next year just in case we need it. But literally, it's like they're sucking out the couch cushions, looking for every nickel they can find, and spending it because, again, there's no fiscal plan, there's no fiscal discipline. What is your vision for a fiscal plan for the state of Alaska? Do you have any? Give me your take on this.
Well, Michael, I've supported the long-term fiscal plan for quite some time. It's something that we've talked about as a state, that we are on a fiscal plan, and that is to use every last drop of the dividend on the state budget. And then after that, we know that taxes are coming. What's happened over the last several years is that we don't want to have that conversation. And, here we are, we're getting closer and closer. And we have one side of the aisle that is saying, we need to talk about this. We need to address it and make sure that we're planning for the future, because the federal dollars will slow down eventually. And we need to be self-sufficient as a state. On the other side of the aisle, we have a demand for more defined benefits that are going to cost us millions and millions more, a demand to increase education funding by at least $300 million a year, on top of many other things that apparently money solves all of our problems. So if we don't do something, we are going to end up down the road of taxes in a way that I think is going to be extremely burdensome to Alaskans. So I've supported the fiscal plan that Representative Ben Carpenter, Senator Myers has talked about, and making the reforms to strengthen our economy, because we can't tax our way out of this.
And of course, that fiscal plan that Carpenter and Myers have both talked about, it was not theirs alone. This came out of a bipartisan, bicameral fiscal policy working group. A group of people that you could not find a more separate group of people anywhere, philosophically, by party, by just full belief system. They were completely opposites, yet in the end, they came together and unanimously supported this holistic plan of 8 or 9 points that said these all need to be taken care of. And yet every attempt in the House, because the Senate has not even really talked about it. The Senate has just ignored it like it didn't even happen. But the House, every attempt to try and bring pieces or parts of this together to try and make it happen has essentially been submarined. And so the fiscal plan coming out of the Senate is 75-25. That's the dividend. For now, next year it'll be 90-10. And the year after that, it'll be 100% of the PFD going to government. That'll be their fiscal plan. But we don't have any support. What's going on? How do we fix that from your perspective?
Well, we're going to have to elect people who actually want to make the change. And right now, people are just making platitudes and running on things about, supporting education. Like you said previously, we all support education, but we have to look at the dollars and cents. We have to figure out how we're going to make this happen when we have a dwindling population. we're struggling, and we are not focusing on our economy. We have to focus on our economy and make that relationship to our budget, because right now, what I see as the plan of the Senate is to have Alaska, the government, as a trust fund baby of the permanent fund. And that's where we're headed right now. They like the fact that most of our budget is now funded by the earnings of the permanent fund. And if their plan is to continue to grow the fund so that we have that reliable source of income. It sounds great. However, it does not make us responsible to what happens in that relationship to our economy and the businesses that turn those dollars over and over that benefit Alaskans. That's what I'm concerned about, is that the Senate is on a fiscal plan, but people aren't recognizing it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how they would. He said it. I mean, he said this is not like it's hidden. They said, "What's your fiscal plan?" And Gary Stevens said, "Our fiscal plan is 75-25. That's our fiscal plan." Literally, that's a quote from the thing. So it's not like they're hiding it. This is what they're doing, and this is the direction they're going. And it's not a plan. It's not a solution. We had Cole Snodgrass on the program yesterday, who is attempting to win the seat in District 38. And I got to tell you, that guy is one of the sharpest candidates that I've ever talked to. And he brought forward the graph, the 10-year plan, from the budget, from the governor's office. And you could see 2026, $1.2 billion deficit. 2027, almost $900 million deficit. The next year, 1.1, 1.3, 1.5. We're talking multi-billion-dollar deficits moving forward. And the only thing that's going to fill that hole, the only thing left on the table to fill that hole, let me guess, the PFD, that remaining 25% goes away. And it's madness. It is absolute madness that this is where and that we cannot get legislators together to put together a holistic approach, or they sabotage it as the pieces come out. That's part. I mean, this can't continue, Sarah.
I agree, Michael. I've been watching this happen for the past 6 years, and it's not just talk. There's some of us who are voting for HJR 7, to enshrine the PFD in the Constitution. We're voting for a stronger constitutional spending cap. We're voting for reduction. Part of the agreement that people seem to forget about is a $250 million reduction in the budget. We're voting for something like a simple sales tax so that we can spread the pain everywhere. I will not vote for a sales tax without the full fiscal plan. However, we have to have this in place so that we can continue to have that relationship and be responsible. We are not being responsible. We keep, as you like to say, kick the can down the road, and we hand it off to the next legislature. I remember the conversation when I was in college, that there was people were working on the fiscal plan at that time. The legislature had a fiscal working group, and I think Murkowski was a part of that. That's how far back this goes. And They said, yeah, what are we going to do? We need to do something about this dividend. And it was put on the ballot of whether or not we should use the dividend to pay for state government. And Alaskans said no. And
82%.
Then nothing happened after that.
82% said no. And then the legislature, another 14 years later, just passed it themselves. The Senate just pushed it through without a vote of the people. Essentially the same plan, the POMV plan, drawing out of the earnings reserve and everything else. And it's the first attack. And it's not the last, because the next attack is already in place. They're going to combine the earnings reserve and the corpus of the fund, and they're going to give the legislature access to the seed corn. That's where things are going. Sarah Vance is our guest. We'll continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Sarah Vance is our guest. Sarah, your sign's giving me a headache here. It's reversed. What the heck?
What
If
is
you're
it?
it's
I can
reversed.
see it.
You can't see it? Can you see it?
Nope.
It's backwards. It's
All
like
right, let me.
I'm
Can
looking
I
in a
fix
mirror.
it?
There should be like a mirror setting or something for your deal there that says because
Okay.
it's backwards. I noticed it before you came. Whoop! She just jumped off. She's gonna jump. She's gonna come back here. She's fixing it.
Edit. How
There
how
you go.
can I
Can
how
you?
can I
I don't know. Isn't there a
here we go.
background there?
Settings.
Settings, background, mirror image, maybe it's called, or reversed.
Yep, hold on. I can do this.
She can do this. She can do this. I can do this. Capable. We have the talent. We have the technology. All right. We're going to get, AC, look at that. Back again. Let's see. Reversed. Better. My brain was going, I couldn't look at your screen because my brain was. All right. I mean, I think I just want to put this slide up and just leave it up there because I mean, every time I talk to somebody, I don't know if you caught Cole's interview on the program yesterday, Sarah, but it was just fantastic. And he had brought that one's good. This one's even worse. I don't know if you can read that on your screen or not.
State
but
spend per capita.
Yeah, and look at here on the left-hand side of the screen, Alaska's number one behind the District of Columbia. Number one of all the states is Alaska, but this is the scary one. State capita versus GDP.
Right.
Yeah, look over there on the far right there, about fourth from the end. Look at Alaska. We have got the per capita per GDP. I mean, you know, we look at the size and scope of this, and we just look. We're on a trend. You know, again.
And it doesn't have to be that way. We have been buying this lie for decades. Since statehood, Michael, since statehood, we have been buying the lie that we cannot be self-sufficient, that we have to rely on federal dollars, that we'll never have enough population to be able to support ourselves. And we are one of the richest sovereigns in the world because of our resources. But we have been tripping over ourselves to stop that, to stop from utilizing those resources for the benefit of the people. The dividend is part of that. I loved listening to Dr. Jack Hickle talk about the relationship to our resources and the dividend for the benefit of the people. But we don't have to continue to live in this upside down world where we're essentially acting like needy victims. It doesn't have to be that way. We can be self-sufficient. We can have the infrastructure, the education, everything that we need, but it has to be right-sized based upon our population. And that's the conversation that we're not having.
Yeah, well, again, it's this disconnect from reality. I think there's a lot of legislators who are running around there who in their heart of hearts and in their minds are saying, we're too big to fail. We won't fail. It won't matter. We can do whatever we want. Arithmetic is, you know, that's a math doesn't count. You know, all the however you want to say it. That's essentially what they're saying, that no matter what happens, we'll have enough money to do all the things that we want to do. And we want to encumber things with new programs like defined benefits or anything else. I mean, we're talking about encumbering the state of Alaska for the next 20 plus years with a defined benefits program without a true sound fiscal note or understanding of what it's going to do. I mean, again, the Reason Foundation said $10 billion over 14 years. I mean, that's not saving us money, as Cliff Gross said. Oh, it would save us money. I just don't believe that that's going to happen. All right. Well, let's get into some particulars here. We're about to rejoin. I guess we don't really need this up there, although I should just throw this up there with every legislative candidate that I have, because dang. Let's get back to it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Sarah Vance is our guest. We will continue. Please like and share, like and follow, and let's get it going on. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Well, I mean, it's a pinch. Just depends on what you're... I feel attacked. The Michael Duke Show continues. Sarah Vance is our guest candidate down on the peninsula for the whole lower peninsula there in House. What's the House district, Sarah? What is it now? Six. I was just saying 6. All right. Sarah, we were talking about a fiscal plan. I mean, you support the fiscal policy working group plan. I know you do. And I guess this is an impossible question, so I apologize in advance. But how do you get your fellow legislators to get behind the plan? I mean, even just in the House. I mean, putting the Senate aside because there's so much madness in the Senate right now. How do you get your fellow majority members on board with the ideas of the fiscal policy working group's fiscal plan? How are you going to do it? I know it's an impossible question, and I'm sorry, but how are you going to do it?
Well, Michael, I don't know that that's my responsibility. I think it's the responsibility of the people who elected them to encourage them to vote for the fiscal plan, because there's nothing that I could possibly say to a sitting legislator to change the minds of what they were elected to do. It's not my job. I don't want them doing that to me, and they certainly don't want me doing that to them. But if the people who elect them tell them, we want you to vote for the fiscal plan all at the same time, because we know that one piece at a time is disastrous, that we have to have the whole plan and move that forward. Now, granted, we can only take one vote at a time, okay? We saw that with HGR 7. But in a single legislature, we can vote for all of the pieces in a fiscal plan. But it's up to the voters to tell their candidates and their legislators to vote for the fiscal plan. You know, that's the reality.
But I guess let me go back to this whole single thing. Do we really? I mean, I know that there's this argument about single subject rule, but the next thing we know, we get an omnibus with a freaking capital budget inside the operating budget, inside the thing. We get all these So I mean, is it just one rule for thee and another for me? Like when we want to do something, we can do it But I mean, a fiscal policy is a single subject. It has pieces. But it's like any other bill, a crime bill. Well, it's a single subject rule. Yes, but the crime bill has multiple pieces inside that change, but it's all under one heading of a crime bill. Wouldn't a fiscal policy bill have all these pieces which are related to fiscal policy, with the exception of HGR 7, because you have to have a standalone vote for a constitutional amendment. But wouldn't I think that's bourgeois. Okay, that whole single subject rule. Let me just say, I think that's a load of Bert Stedman that you just have not seen anywhere right there. I mean, it makes no sense. Somebody's selling us something at that point.
Well, you do have a point. However, several of the components of the fiscal plan are constitutional amendments. So they have to be passed on their own.
Right.
So that's part of the issue. But I see we have quite a few questions that need to be addressed in the comments. And number one is that a state income tax is not part of the fiscal plan. I will never vote for a state income tax. I gave my word when I was first elected to say no to a state income tax. I do not believe that is a way that would benefit Alaskans. So just to be clear, it is a nominal, I think, 2% sales tax, part of the fiscal plan that would be considered with a stronger constitutional spending cap, a PFD in the Constitution to about $250 million in reduction. I think there's something that I missed.
Yeah, there's cuts. There's cuts. There's a 2% sales tax. There's a new tax increase in tax on the oil companies. There's a spending cap. And there is the protection of the PFD. There's 8 parts to it. So, I mean, yes, it's multiple people. And yes, as I was saying, and I said, you have to have a separate have to have a separate vote on HJR 7 for anything that's constitutional has to have a separate vote. But there's no reason why you couldn't have everything else put together in a single bill, have the constitutional amendments, the spending cap, the protection of the permanent fund, why they couldn't be, and everything could be brought to the floor and held and then voted on at the same time. Because otherwise Cliff Grow is on this program and he said, well, I would have voted for that, but all the other pieces weren't there. Well, single subject rule, you guys are the ones that are throwing flags on the play to say, well, we can't do that because they're saying it's ridiculous. It's like anything we can do to justify not having to do it. That's the problem.
Well, as you know, in the legislature, anything is possible, but it doesn't mean that everything is legal. And I think that if we did do that, Michael, that we would probably have some challenges in court. So we could use it as a means to get it over to another body, but I think it would just complicate. It would make things kind of messy. We could have all of the bills on the floor at the same time on the same calendar day to move them. That is very, very doable. However, we just have to have legislators who are willing to do it. Another question that someone had that I think needs to be addressed is, would this fiscal plan be available to the public? Absolutely. Every piece of the fiscal plan is on the legislative website, available for you to take a look at right now. The work that was done several years ago is available of what that comprehensive plan should look like. And we want you engaged in this public process. We need you engaged right now. It goes back to the original question, what can I do to convince legislators? New people coming on who are not familiar with the fiscal plan, it is our job as fellow lawmakers who have been a part of this process before to talk to them and educate them on really what this looks like and what it would entail. But it's not my job to convince them to vote for it. That's your job as a voter, to tell them that this is important to you, because I will never change their mind from what they were elected to do. And you have to make that very, very clear from the beginning. Just like my first term, I was elected to vote no on a state income tax. I will not change my mind on that, because that would be breaking my word to my voters. And part of my success is keeping my word. And I want to make sure that that's very, very clear as we move forward, that that's the only thing that we have in the legislature. So I think we've answered most of the questions on the fiscal plan, but it definitely needs to be a priority in every district, not just a few.
Sarah Vance is our guest. I'm sorry, I don't mean to harp on this, but to me, it kind of blows my mind that we're still fighting out over this thing, which we know is going to kill. For those of you who are on the radio, I put the 10-year plan up on the screen during the last commercial break, and we talked about it. Again, next year, fiscal year 2026, $1.28 billion deficit is projected. Where is that money going to come from? There's only a couple choices. There's really only one choice, and that's from your PFD. That's where it's coming from. Sarah, let's talk about education. Education obviously sucked all the oxygen out of the room this year. And there was a question about, what's the best way to fix it? Is the best way to fix it through a BSA increase? Or are there other things that we need to do? Are we paying just enough? Is it too small? Is it too large? Is it just right? Where are we at on education, and what's your take on this?
Wow. That's kind of a trick question, isn't it? Is the BSA going to fix everything? And the answer is obviously no. We know that parental engagement is the key to helping our students succeed. When our parents are involved in educating their children, then the children are going to respond in a positive way, and we're going to see the success. We know that reading improves when parents sit down and read with their children, things like that. One of the solutions that I think is that the school districts need to stop changing the curriculum every few years. There needs to be continuity. I use I use Abeka, which was something that I was taught with. It's heavy in phonics, and my children have the exact same phonics curriculum. Now, everything else has been updated, obviously, but I'm able to step in and teach them the phonics curriculum on how to read, and they're excellent readers. We don't have that. We've stepped away from that, and it disengages parents from being able to actively participate in their children's education. However, the topic of the BSA is on the table, and I think that we should fund inside the formula because it's spent more responsibly. How large that number is, I don't know. I've asked the Department of Education to provide us with numbers of what school districts actually need, because what we hear in the legislature is what the union tells us, and I'm not sure that that is based upon need. So I think there's a lot of elements at place. Even Bert Stedman has questioned whether or not the BSA formula is effective anymore, and we need to take a look and make sure that it's working and doing what it was originally intended to do.
And this is the thing. I was talking about this with my previous guest, Savannah Fletcher. You know, she was talking about fiscal certainty, that's what the school districts needs is fiscal certainty. That's what's fair. Well, but the problem is, again, this is an appropriations process. This is not a set, we know the money's going to be there and we need to go. You know, the BSA can be changed, but we treat it like it's enshrined in the Constitution. We don't want to touch it, right? I mean, that really is, that's how it's tradition is said, well, we can't touch it. We can't change it. But the question is it fair and equitable? With, when you've got some school districts who are receiving, with the formula additions and all the extra factors and everything else, when they're receiving, 150% of the base of the BSA, where homeschoolers are receiving 90%, and some other districts may only be receiving 110%. Is it fair? Is it equitable? And is it sustainable? That's the biggest question in the long run. And shouldn't it be a fight every year? Shouldn't this be a discussion? Not a fight, I guess. Shouldn't this be part of the discussion every year? Just like every other department has to justify their spend, shouldn't they have to justify that at that point?
I think every line item in the budget should have to be justified. Every other department is budgeted on an annual basis, and you don't hear about them being concerned that they're going to be fired every year. The school districts have sent this message that the world is coming to an end every year, but they pass their budget in March when the legislature doesn't pass their budget until May. Why are the schools not basing their budget on the prior year's numbers for stability?
Working as intended is why, because it's public pressure. Because then they can all say that's why all the contracts require a notification from the school districts if they're uncertain, and they give them the pink slips so they can run around with their hair on fire waving their pink slips saying I'm going to get fired. It's public pressure that's being put on people to support any amount of spend from the state government.
The legislature fully funds the BSA every year. I'll say it again because people don't believe me. They don't know. The legislature fully funds the BSA because it's a formula based upon the number of students and a lot of other factors every single year. And often, as we did this year, puts more money on top of that. People are not knowing that the legislature has fully funded the base student allocation every single year. And I think that's something that needs to be clarified. So It's based, if we see numbers shrinking, we need to ask, are the student populations shrinking in that school that's impacting the amount of BSA that the school is getting? And then ask the further question of why.
All right, Sarah Vance is our guest. Man, we're going to continue here in just a minute. I think we'll give Sarah the floor in the next segment to see, because I've been hitting on the same things for months now. Let's see if she's got something else she wants to talk about here and get her final thoughts as well. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
That's groovy. You're a mental suppository. All right. I'm only here to make Sarah laugh. That's the only reason that I'm here, is just to make Sarah laugh. That's the thing, Sarah, is that you nailed it. Why are school districts building their budgets and approving the budgets 60 days before the state has approved their budget? This is this is all working as intended. This is a feature. They built it so that they know that they built their budgets. Now they can hand out those pink slips. The people can put on their red T-shirts and hold up their pink slips and go to borough assembly meetings and go to the legislature and scream, "I'm going to be fired if you don't do what I think." And then they go to the public and say, "Your children will be running naked in the streets because they're not being educated, because nobody cares." And it's kabuki. It's all it is. It's kabuki. As you said, we have fully funded the BSA every year. Just because you have piss poor management with your budgets and can't prioritize what needs to be done, or your demographics have changed and your student population is declining, so you're going to receive less money, and you can't figure out how to pull your horns in and shrink your footprint or shrink your fiscal plan to match. That's not our problem. But see, this is the theater that we're working on right now.
It is, and it's unfortunate because it leaves the people in a state of fear and feeling very nervous. And so they're going to advocate for their schools and their communities, which we want them to do, but they're not being given the full information. A lot of people have talked about forward funding education. And when I was first elected, I said, why don't we forward fund the entire budget then? Some states do it. But again, we need a fiscal plan to be able to do that. And the courts have determined that we have to have the money in the bank if we're going to forward fund. But we are so far away from that conversation because we haven't looked at the responsibility of a fiscal plan, of knowing how to properly budget everything else. And we need to just slow down on this conversation and listen to each other and get the bigger piece of the pie, rather than focusing on one sliver all the time. Education is our second largest budget item, and I think that's significant. And most people don't realize that.
And it's a significant, but we're talking about $2 billion, right? I mean, it's going to be 2.2 almost, or something like that. It's $2 billion for 140,000 kids. That includes correspondence schools and everything else. I mean, that's a lot of money, man. That's a lot of money. And yet we're not doing enough. In fact, we're shirking our duty. So, I mean, that's what they're saying. Not what I'm saying, but that's what they're saying.
Should we talk about the next hot button, Michael? Should we talk about elections?
We should, but I want to wait till we turn to the radio. I know you wanted to talk about that, so I wanted to wait. That's why I'm going to give you your head here a little bit to talk about it. But yeah, Sarah, I'm reaching that frustration factor with some of these people. The interview in hour one was interesting to say the least, but also frustrating because I can see how reasonable people sound, how reasonable they sound when they say, well, we need more of your money. We need more of everybody. It's going to be fair and equitable. It's going to be good. But the problem is, the question that nobody asks is who pays? Who pays for all this? And in the next 2 years, well, Alaskans will pay through a PFD cut, which disproportionately affects the lowest 80% of income earners in the state to begin with. But after the 2-year mark, probably after the 24-month mark, there will be no more money because they will have basically absorbed all of the PFD. And then the income tax, the sales tax, some kind of tax there's going to be new revenues. It'll be the free rides die hard moment. It will be you need to pay your fair share. You've had it easy all these years without any kind of tax, and now we've got to be like every other state. We never wanted to be like any other state until, now we need to be like every other state. And that's the problem. That's what's frustrating to me.
It's heartbreaking, Michael. It's because we can see that there's no more track ahead. And the train is chugging down the road, and we're always hoping for the great windfall from the oil. And I really hope that we have a return of oil. However, now is the time to have the fiscal plan so that we have discipline. Because if you think back, the spending came from the CBR, the Constitutional Budget Reserve, which we owe, I think, $16 billion.
Yeah.
And we finally said we can't be doing that anymore. It's gone down pretty low. And so now the next cookie jar is the dividend, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I'm always reminded of that bumper sticker. Please, Lord, give us another oil boom. We promise not to piss this one away. Right? That's the old bumper sticker. And I, anytime somebody says, "Well, we hope oil comes back," yeah. Well, unless we change our discipline, nothing's going to change. It'll be a repeat of the same channel, same thing all over. All right, Sarah Vance is our guest. Let's get to it. The Michael Duke Show. Okay, Sarah Vance is our guest. We're continuing one final segment here on the show. Sarah has some other things I knew she wanted to talk about, including elections. Now, Sarah, there's a tale of woe that happened at the end of the last legislative session. You had an election bill that you were working on, bipartisanship, everything else, yada, yada, yada. It got over to the Senate, and Scott Kawasaki and his committee threw it in a drawer, slammed the drawer, locked it, and then walked away, right? I mean, so what's going on with elections integrities? There's been a lot of talk about, voter registration with PFDs and everything else. What's Sarah's, what do you got here on elections coming up?
Well, let's kind of back up a little bit. Okay. Senator Shower took the lead. His office took the lead a number of years ago on election integrity issues and really dug in very meaningful ways. I partnered with him. I said, hey, I want to be a part of what you're doing because this is great work. We need to do this. And I was in House State Affairs Committee and Judiciary my entire tenure, and so worked on the House side to try to implement a lot of the common sense measures and stop the craziness that the left was trying to do, like same-day voter registration and a variety of measures, registering 16-year-olds to vote or early, things like that most of us would say, are you out of your mind? So I have been the lead in the House on this simply because I was in those committees. We saw over the years that these huge election omnibus bills were not working. They'd be 60 pages deep. We couldn't come to agreements, and so nothing would happen. We would get zip because we couldn't come to agreement. So this last legislature, I took the approach of dividing the top issues into smaller bills and moving on those. And through the conversations in the legislature, I decided that cleaning up the voter rolls would be the single most important thing that we could do. Everyone knows that we have an overinflated voter rolls now. I've heard anywhere from 108 to 116% overinflation of the voter rolls. And the first person who came out with those numbers was actually an incredible legislative staffer in Shower's office, and then started digging in with the Division of Elections on the validity of that. ADN did a news article, and it came to light. So my bill, House Bill 129, was a 4-page bill. We received bipartisan support in the House for this bill to clean up our voter rolls. It didn't go as strong as what we wanted, but I reduced the number by 2 years timeline for removing someone to inactive status, to remove off the voter rolls. It gets over to the Senate. Kawasaki said on it, because I moved it immediately this year in session, and he sat on it for a while, and then he decided to pull out his magic markers and do what he wanted with it. And I told him that he would not get consent in the House because I intentionally kept the bill simple. I think voters also need to know that the prior session that Kawasaki had another voter omnibus bill that he couldn't even get support in the Senate. It sat in Senate rules, and he would not move it off on the Senate floor. because it was such a big bill that he couldn't find agreement on. So he decided to do that to my bill and moved it through the Senate against my will. And they continued to disregard my will as a sponsor of the bill and tried everything possible to be able to pass that bill. They tried to bribe my members in the House. And I just want to give a shout out to the House Republicans for standing strong on those last hours of the session, because there were some of them who were being pressured in incredible ways. They had their votes, their bills in the Senate that were being leveraged with this election bill. If you think the legislature and the way the Senate moves is squeaky clean, let me tell you, there was some dirty pool that last night all over this election bill. You want to talk about one of the most important issues right now? It is our elections. And it was not worth them simply getting behind cleaning up the voter rolls. So if they're telling you in their elections right now that they support cleaning up our voter rolls, it must not be bad enough.
Right. Well, again, because he turducken the hell out of this thing, filled it with a bunch of stuff, and then wanted to get it through. And I heard about some of that last minute arm twisting, threats on bills that were in the Senate. Also capital budget project. If you want this in your district, we'll get, if you vote for this, we'll get you more money in your districts and everything. I mean, some real kind of, timpani hall kind of arm twisting going on in the background. I mean, that's some crazy stuff, but this is what's going on, which says to me that this is a big, important issue that we need to deal with.
This is one of the most important issues to deal with. This is what people are talking about all over the country. They're talking about all over the state. They want to know that their vote counts and that it's not being canceled out by someone who should not be voting in Alaska. And I was very intentional on moving a bill that everyone could get behind. It was bipartisan. I made sure that I didn't stink it up with other hot button issues. I wanted to keep it clean and narrow so that we could all get behind it in a bipartisan way. That's something that doesn't happen on a regular basis. Everyone tries to have, let's pass a bill, making a new flag or whatever, kumbaya. But this was something that would provide a clear direction for the Division of Elections on how to clean up our voter rolls, the governmental sources of data to make sure that people are residing and eligible to vote here. It was highly important. But the Senate got greedy and they wanted other measures at the same time. And I said, I'm not going to do it. I will not negotiate with terrorists. And that's exactly what it seemed like, is that they were holding bills hostage all for what they wanted in elections.
Well, and this is, again, par for the course. We saw the same thing in the past where they were going to withhold funding from like Kanikus Bay Road rebuilding and everything else simply because if you don't vote for it, we're going to cut this program. 10 years we've been waiting for the rebuild and they were going to do it. It's the same kind of thing. It's basically holding people hostage. I mean, people's lives. I've lived here for 10 years on this road and 12 people have died in 10 years. This is not a safe place. It needs to be fixed, but they were going to withhold that. It's a dirty pool, I think, is definitely the right answer there. Sarah, we got 2.5 minutes here, so I want to give you a chance. Final thoughts, exhortations to the listeners, folks who live in your district. Why should Sarah Vance go back? What do they need to do to help you and support you? Give us the full rundown here.
Oh, Michael, there's just so many reasons. Number one is that I love serving the people of my district of the Lower Kenai Peninsula and really the state of Alaska. I have people reach out to me from all over the state, which is very heartwarming. I do what I was elected to do. And every 2 years, I go back before my voters and I ask, what are your priorities? What do you want me to focus on? And make sure that that's very clear that I'm doing the will of people and keeping my word. We know that that's not something that people can really have trust in. And I want to make sure that I'm not a politician, but I'm a public servant. I am the only District 6 candidate who stands with President Trump. And I know that that's a little dicey to say right now, but I don't support the man. I support his policies for Alaska that will strengthen our economy. And that is a dividing line between me and my opponents. I support protecting girls' sports because I know that girls are girls and boys are boys, and women have fought for that level playing field for a very long time. I voted for that bill and many others. I support the repeal of ranked choice voting. It's common sense. People want one person, one vote. So there are a lot of things that will divide me between me and my opponents. It is getting to be a dicey race, which, you know, is kind of fun because it makes it challenging. But I would love for you to put out my signs in your yard if you have them. It's time to pull them out. And you can follow me on my social media pages at Vote Sarah Vance. Give me a call if you want to chat and get to know me better. I love representing you, and I need your vote next Tuesday in the primary. Vote Vance.
All right, Sarah Vance, candidate House District 6, running for re-election. And fingers crossed, I'm not in her district, but I'd vote for her if I was. So there you go. Folks, we're out of time. We'll be back on Monday. Have a good day. Okay, final bite at the apple, Sarah. You know how it is. We got a minute or 2 or 3, maybe for you 4. I don't know. We'll see. Sarah Vance, final thoughts for today as we get ready to wrap for the weekend.
Well, one issue that we haven't talked about that's always hot is the fisheries. And if you follow my Vote Sarah Vance page, you will see that I am returning a check that was donated to me by some wonderful people in the corporate fishing industry. I have great respect for all of our seafood processors. However, I cannot accept their money at this time. I do not accept money from trawlers because I want to make sure that I'm representing everyone in the fishery and are able to move through the tough conversations that we need to have with clean hands. And it's a challenging time, but I'm going to fight to reduce bycatch and at the same time strengthen our seafood industry. So, you know, I think those are some tough conversations that people need to have and understand that there are Alaskans behind a lot of those donations. However, there's big corporates from Seattle too. And I'm trying to move through this as respectfully as I can for everyone involved. But it's a decision that I made as a coastal member that I want to be able to listen to every side of this because we need to bring solutions to our fisheries that everyone is focused on right now.
Fisheries is a tough issue, and I've watched it kind of tangentially, especially coming from the interior. You know, some of the, you know, because we're at the end of the chain, so to speak. So I've watched it a bit, but it's something that this next year I really want to kind of get into and get more details on because it does concern me. As a former commercial fisherman, right out of high school, I went commercial fishing for a while, and I was kind of shocked, quite honestly, to see some of the things that happened, you know, with the trawlers and what was brought up and all the things and the damage that could be done. And I'm concerned. I am concerned about what's happening, especially when you see things like people on the Yukon not even being able to go out there and run their subsistence lifestyle because there's no fish, you know, on the thing. That's troubling to me. So definitely something we need to dig into deeper, and hopefully maybe this next year we can have a little better insight into it and get the parties together to talk about it. I think you're right. I think it's an important issue for sure. Well, Sarah, maybe I'll see you this weekend. Thank you for coming on board. We're in good luck to you. Of course, you're going to make it through the primary because there's only 4 of you in the race, but you definitely got your work cut out for you. You are the standalone amongst all the candidates in this seat. They seem to be a little more aligned with each other, so this should be an interesting race, and I look forward to seeing you win, and hopefully we get folks out there behind you. So thanks for coming on board.
Thank you, Michael, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm only 27, so please don't get confused there. Thanks for coming on board, Sarah. All right, we're out of time. I got to go. I got things to do. And we're going to continue on Monday. Out of time. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return on Monday. Thanks for being part of it, guys. Remember, of all the things that I want you to do, I want you to be kind. I want you to love one another, and I want you to live well. That's the best. And be ungovernable. Be ungovernable. All right, folks. We will see you next week.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.